The sound of car keys hitting my kitchen table was the sound of my whole life savings disappearing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at that shiny little piece of metal, and felt something inside me go very, very cold. My name is Rosa. I am 67 years old. For 42 years I ran the toughest produce stall in the Central Market, the one every vendor feared and every customer trusted. And that morning, my son-in-law looked at me like I was a confused old woman who couldn't count anymore. He had no idea he had just signed his own destruction. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and toasted bread, that warm lying smell that tries to convince you everything is fine, even when the walls are rotting from the inside. I sat in my usual chair, the one with the embroidered cushion that lost its color years ago, and I looked straight at Manuel. He stood there with his chest puffed out like a rooster who has never once stepped into a real fight, swinging a keychain with some shiny foreign logo on it. Brand new. Gleaming. Beside him, my daughter Elena stared down at her own hands folded on the table, unable to look up. Guilty by silence. Victim by habit. "What is this, Manuel?" I asked, even though the answer was already burning a hole through my stomach. My voice came out calm. Too calm for the storm building behind my ribs. "An investment, mother," he said, dragging a chair to sit across from me, wearing a kind of confidence that made me sick. "You saw how my old car kept breaking down. I need reliable transportation for my business. So, I made an executive decision." Executive decision. The words floated in the air like a joke with no punchline. Manuel hadn't held a real job in 3 years. His businesses were pyramid schemes, knockoff perfume, and sports bets that always ended in red numbers. "And which money did you use for this executive decision?" I asked, feeling my fingers dig into the edge of the table so I wouldn't leap across it and grab his throat. He laughed, nervous but arrogant, and took a loud sip of my coffee. "Don't be dramatic, mother-in-law. I borrowed what was in that little notebook you keep hidden in the cookie tin in the closet." There it was. $41,000. "Let's be honest," he said, "you don't even use that money. It just sits there collecting dust, losing value to inflation. I did you a favor. I put it to work. Now we have a family car with air conditioning to take you to your doctor's appointments. Isn't that a good deal?" A ringing sound filled my ears. $41,000. Not a fortune to a millionaire. But to me, it was every freezing morning hauling crates of oranges at 4 a.m. It was every meal I skipped so I could save a little more. It was my insurance against becoming a burden, my funeral money, my medicine money. That money wasn't paper. It was my sweat, crystallized. My lifetime, sacrificed in that market, fighting suppliers and thieves so nobody would ever steal a single cent from me. And this man, this parasite with cheap cologne, had taken it while I slept in the next room. I looked at Elena. My girl. The one I raised alone after her father left for cigarettes and never came back. I waited for her to say something. To scream. To throw the coffee in his face. But she just shrank further into her chair. "Mom, Manuel says he's going to pay it back," she whispered, her voice thin as thread about to snap. "He needed the car to find work." Really? That betrayal was more bitter than the theft itself. I realized in that exact moment, I was alone at that table. There was no family there. Just 2 strangers. One who saw me as a broken ATM machine, and one who saw me as acceptable collateral damage to keep her husband happy. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked, that familiar sound Manuel surely mistook for weakness, the sound of an old structure about to collapse. I walked to the window that faced the street. There it was. A silver-gray sedan gleaming under the morning sun, parked crookedly in front of my gate. It looked obscene there, paid for with my old age. "Did you go into my room while I was sleeping?" I asked, without turning around. "Don't say it like that, it sounds ugly," Manuel defended himself, mouth full of bread. "I just went in quietly. Didn't want to wake you. You sleep pretty hard, mother-in-law. Snore a little too. That was the invasion." The violation of my sanctuary. My room was the one place where I was still Rosa. Not the grandmother. Not the mother-in-law. The strong woman. He had rifled through my things, touched my memories, opened that old cookie tin where I kept my notebook and bank slips wrapped in a silk handkerchief. I turned to face him. He expected shouting. He expected the tears of a helpless old woman, complaints that the wind would carry away. He was ready to endure a 10-minute lecture and then go on with his life, driving my money around the city. But I am not that woman. I am the one who negotiated prices with 200-pound truck drivers on the loading docks. I am the one who chased off a thief from my stall with a machete back in the 90s. My hands, spotted with age, calloused from years of counting money, have handled more cash than Manuel will see in his entire pitiful life. I looked him dead in the eyes. Those empty brown eyes with no morals in them. Good for you, Manuel, I said, forcing a smile that never touched my eyes. Good for you, having a new car. Enjoy it. Confusion crossed his face for a second, quickly replaced by smug relief. See, Elena, I told you your mom would understand. It's pure logic. He turned to me, beaming. Thank you, mother-in-law. You'll see, you won't regret it. We can even take you to the beach this weekend. Of course, I answered, walking toward my bedroom with a firm step. Let me go get my glasses. I'll be right back. I entered my room and closed the door softly. The air inside felt thick, charged with the energy of betrayal. I went to the cookie tin. Empty, tossed on my dresser. He hadn't even had the decency to put it back in its place. I touched it with my fingertips, feeling the cold metal. I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was an icy clarity, an absolute focus I hadn't experienced since my best years running that stall. They think that because my hair is white and I walk slowly, my mind has gone soft. They think old age is a synonym for stupidity or surrender. Manuel thinks that respect for elders is just a phrase that forces me to forgive his abuse so I don't end up alone. He has no idea that loneliness is a palace compared to the company of a thief. I picked up my cell phone, an old but functional model resting on my nightstand. My fingers did not shake as I unlocked the screen. I dialed 3 numbers. 911. Emergency services. What is your situation? Good morning, I said, my voice firm and clear. I want to report a robbery in progress at my home. An aggravated theft. The perpetrator is in my kitchen right now. He has confessed to the crime, and he is currently in possession of goods purchased with the stolen money. Are you in danger, ma'am? The operator asked, her voice tightening. Not physically. But my life savings have been looted. The thief is a family member by marriage who took advantage of me being asleep to enter my private bedroom and remove $41,000 in cash and bank documents. I gave my address with military precision. Street, number, the color of the house, landmarks. His name is Manuel Reyes. He is having breakfast in my kitchen right now. And miss, I paused, catching my own reflection in the closet mirror. I saw a woman with wrinkles, yes, but with a square jaw and the look of someone who refuses to be walked over. Tell the officers he believes he has my consent. I need them to come prepared for an arrest. I will not be dropping the charges. Unit is on the way, ma'am. Please stay somewhere safe. I hung up and set the phone gently on the bed. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and smelled the lavender sachet I always keep in my drawers. That was my scent. The scent of order, of cleanliness, of decency. Everything Manuel had dirted. I walked out of the room and back into the kitchen. Manuel was biting into another piece of toast, laughing at something on his phone. Elena looked at me with a mix of relief and guilt, thinking the storm had passed. Everything okay, mother-in-law? He asked without looking up. Everything's perfect, Manuel. I sat back down across from him, folding my hands on the table. I was just thinking about what you said. You're right. Money sitting in a drawer is useless. It should be put to work. Exactly. You get it. That's why we get along so well, because deep down you've got a shark's mind, just like me. Shark's mind. Poor illusion. He was a pufferfish, all bloated air and useless spines. I was the tide about to drag him under. I poured myself more coffee, even though it had gone cold, and drank it slowly, savoring every second of silence. I could hear the wall clock ticking. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Every second was one more step of the patrol car getting closer to my door. I looked around my kitchen. Every tile I had paid for. The stove, bought in cash 10 years ago. The refrigerator, the blender, even the forks. Everything in this house had a story of effort behind it. And Manuel, in his infinite arrogance, thought he could walk in, take whatever he wanted, and calm me down with a trip to the beach. He thought my mother's love for Elena would tie my hands. But Elena was no longer a child, and I was no longer just a mother. I was a citizen. A woman who had worked far too hard to let a leech drink her blood. So how does the car drive? I asked, keeping the conversation alive, weaving my net. Silky smooth, mother-in-law, Bluetooth stereo, power windows. A real machine. Whenever you want, I'll show you the inside, though you don't drive anymore anyway, right? Better that way, less stress. I'm your designated driver from now on. How thoughtful of you, I said, and the irony was so thick you could have cut it with a knife, but he was too in love with the sound of his own voice to notice. Good to know who has the keys. In the distance, very far away, I heard the first wail of a siren. It was faint at first, blending into the traffic noise from the main avenue, but little by little it grew sharper, more cutting. Elena lifted her head. You hear that? Sounds like something happened close by, she said. Probably some accident, with the amount of idiots on the road, Manuel commented, waving it off. The siren got louder. It filled the street, bouncing off the walls of the neighboring houses. It was the sound of justice, or at least the sound of consequences. Manuel stood up to go to the window, curious as always. Hey, that sounds pretty close. He peeked outside, pulling back the curtain with the same hand that had violated my savings. I watched his back tense. I watched curiosity turn into rigidity. That's weird, he murmured. They stopped right in front here. Who is it, Elena? The police, I answered, still seated, feeling a powerful calm run through my veins. There are 2 patrol cars. They're looking at the car. He turned to me, brow furrowed, a shadow of doubt crossing his spoiled child face for the first time. Mother-in-law, are you expecting someone? I stood up slowly, resting my firm hands on the table. I looked at him with the coldness of someone calculating the exact weight of merchandise before charging for it. I'm not expecting anyone, Manuel. I'm expecting justice. What? His voice trembled. At that moment, a sharp knock echoed through the whole house. Elena gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Manuel went pale as old ash. He looked at me, and for the first time, he saw who I really was. He didn't see the harmless old woman who knitted on the sofa. He saw the merchant who had survived crises, devaluations, and robberies. He saw the owner of everything around him. Rosa, he whispered, using my real name for the first time in years, forgetting mother-in-law. What did you do? I walked toward the door, passing right by him without stopping, feeling my heart beat with the strength of a freshly oiled engine. What I had to do, boy. Take back what's mine. The door opened and 2 officers stepped in with that caution of people who don't know if they'll find a tragedy or a domestic comedy waiting for them. Manuel tried to play his usual card, the charming man, the victim of circumstance, the misunderstood son-in-law dealing with his senile old mother-in-law. Officers, this is embarrassing really, he said, laughing a laugh that sounded like broken glass. My mother-in-law, you know how it is at her age. She gets confused sometimes, forgets things. I borrowed some money for an emergency and she thinks I stole it. It's just a family misunderstanding. I remained standing by the table, back straight, hands clasped, radiating the same authority I once used to watch over the porters who tried to steal fruit from my stall. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply pointed to the empty savings notebook on the table, then to the brand new car shining insultingly through the window. "Officer," I said, my voice like ice, "that man has not had a job in 3 years. That notebook was locked in my bedroom. The transaction is dated yesterday at 3 in the afternoon, the exact hour I was at my physical therapy appointment, and he was supposedly out looking for work. That is not a loan. That is a betrayal of trust, and theft from an elderly person. And I want it noted in the report that my daughter, present here, knew about the car and said nothing." Manuel's smile crumbled. The reality of the situation, cold and hard as concrete, hit his face. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This was a financial crime, and I had the receipts, literal and figurative. While the officers asked for his identification and began questioning him about the origin of the funds for the vehicle, I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the awakening of a muscle I hadn't used in a long time. The survival instinct. As they took Manuel away in handcuffs, kicking and shouting that I was crazy, that I was ungrateful, I realized the real battle had only just begun. Elena stayed crying on the couch, curled up, looking at me like I was the monster. When the patrol car pulled away and the house fell into a tomb-like silence, broken only by my daughter's sobs, I did not sit down to comfort her. I couldn't. If I did, I would go back to being the permissive mother who had allowed this disaster to happen. Instead, I walked to my room and locked the door. I needed to take inventory, not of what had been stolen from me, but of what I had left. I went to the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Manuel never opened it because it smelled of mothballs and old clothes, things that disgusted him. I pushed aside the wool blankets and pulled out a reinforced shoebox. Inside was no money. Manuel had already taken the easy cash. What was in there was worth far more, but you needed a brain to understand it. I took out a worn black leather address book, its pages yellowed from decades of use in the market, smelling of cumin and cloves. Inside, written in my own tight handwriting, were the names and phone numbers of people who owed me favors, loyalties forged over decades of trade. Lawyers, locksmiths, suppliers, even a few city officials I had helped when they were snot-nosed kids. Manuel thought that by stealing my money, he had left me naked. Poor fool. He took my paper, but he did not take my history. He did not take my reputation. He saw an old woman who shuffled her feet. He did not see the invisible safety net I had woven over 40 years of honest work. I looked at my hands. Covered in age spots, veins showing like blue rivers under thin skin. For the last 5 years since I retired, I had let these hands go soft, dedicated only to cooking for them, washing their clothes, stroking the head of a daughter who didn't know how to defend me. I had let myself be convinced my time had passed, that my opinion mattered less because I didn't know how to use phone apps. How had I allowed this? At what point did the woman who ruled aisle 7 become the mother-in-law who was just in the way? It was gradual. First it was little jokes about my memory. Then the insistence that I shouldn't carry heavy things. Then Manuel offering to go to the bank for me so you don't tire yourself out. They took my control away inch by inch, disguising it as care, wrapping their greed in the gift wrap of false concern. And I, to avoid causing problems, out of fear of loneliness, out of that terrible fear that my daughter would stop speaking to me, gave in. I looked in the mirror on my dresser. I saw my dark, sunken eyes, but with a spark I thought was extinct. They fooled you, Rosa, I said out loud to myself. They fooled you because you closed your eyes. But you've opened them now. Manuel believed that with the new car, he had power. He believed that by spending my savings, he had me tied to his will, because he thought that without that money, I would depend on him to eat. He didn't know the house was in my name. He didn't know that even though my old market stall was closed, the lease itself was still mine, and it was worth 10 times more than that plastic car. I heard Elena knock timidly at the door. Mom, please, open up. We need to talk. You have to drop the charges. They're going to put him in jail. I didn't answer. I let her knock. She needed to understand that access to me was no longer free. I went back to the shoebox and pulled out another document, the deed to the house. The paper was thick, formal. I read my name. Rosa Delgado, sole owner. No lifetime tenancy for anyone. No co-owners. This house, these walls that Manuel had filled with his cigarette smoke and his laziness, were my fortress. For years, Manuel had strutted through here as if he owned the place, criticizing the paint, demanding new furniture, complaining the internet was slow. And I bowed my head. Yes, dear, we'll see. Yes, Manuel, you're right. How much bile had I swallowed? I stood up and realized my knee hurt less. Or maybe the pain was still there, but my rage was stronger and drowned it out. I began pacing the room, sketching a plan in my mind. It wasn't enough to put him in jail for a couple of days. He would get out. Men like Manuel always get out, slippery as cockroaches. I needed to armor myself. I needed to make sure that when he came back, he found every door closed. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number in my leather address book. Ramirez Hardware. Good afternoon. Is Chato there? Speaking. Who's calling? Tell him it's Rosa, from the Oranges. Tell him I need a locksmith I can trust, urgently, one of those who doesn't ask questions and works fast. And tell him I'm going to need high-security locks. There was a pause, and then I heard the familiar raspy voice of my old friend. Rosa, what a miracle. I thought you'd forgotten about us poor folks. What happened, woman? You sound different. I sound awake, Chato. I sound awake. I need to change every lock in my house today, and I need you to send 2 of your strongest guys to help move some things. Trouble with the son-in-law? He asked, with the instinct only a life in this neighborhood can give you. Trouble that ends today. Can you help me? In half an hour, there. Whatever the boss orders. I hung up and felt a wave of satisfaction. Boss. It had been so long since anyone had called me that. It sounded sweet. It sounded right. I walked out of the room with the address book in one hand and the deed under the other arm. Elena was still in the living room, eyes red, on the phone, probably with Manuel's family, telling them the version where I was the wicked witch. When she saw me, she hung up quickly. Mom, what are you going to do? She asked, looking at me with a fear that wasn't physical, but the fear of someone watching the rules of the game change and not knowing how to play anymore. I'm doing some cleaning, Elena, I said, walking toward the kitchen. And you have to decide something very important within the next hour. Decide whether you're the daughter of Rosa Delgado, or the wife of the thief who stole my old age from his own pocket. Mom, you can't make me choose. He's my husband. He wanted to give us a better life with that car. He was wrong, yes, but he didn't do it out of malice. I stopped and looked at her. My poor girl, 40 years old and still believing in fairy tales where the toads turn into princes, when in reality, the toads only fill your house with mud. Stealing from an old woman while she sleeps is malice, Elena. Spending my medicine money on a Bluetooth stereo is malice. And watching it happen and staying quiet, I let the sentence hang in the air, heavy as a tombstone. I'm changing the locks. Manuel does not walk back into this house. If you want to stay, you're welcome, but the rules are going to change. Here we work, we respect, and we contribute. No more free hotel for Mom. Elena opened her mouth to protest, to tell me it was illegal, that it was cruel, but the doorbell interrupted her. It was Chato's crew, right on time. I opened the door and the fresh afternoon air rushed in, washing away the smell of confinement and lies. The locksmiths brought drills and toolboxes. Behind them, a hardware store truck pulled up. Good afternoon, Dona Rosa, said the foreman, tipping his cap with respect. The boss sent us. Says you're in charge. I nodded, feeling my spine straighten a little more. Come in, boys. Start with the front door. I want a double-cylinder lock, and then I want you to take everything in the guest room and put it on the sidewalk. Everything, ma'am? The young man asked, glancing at Elena, who was sobbing in the corner. Everything. Clothes, shoes, weights, and that collection of ridiculous magazines. If it's not mine or my daughter's, it goes outside. As the drills began to whir, devouring the metal of the old locks Manuel had crossed so many times with impunity, I sat down in my usual kitchen chair, but this time I did not feel small. I placed the address book on the table and searched for the next number. It was the lawyer's turn. I looked out the window. The new car still sat there with police tape around it like a monument to human stupidity. Soon it would be towed away as evidence. Manuel was in a cell, Elena was at the crossroads of her life, and I was drinking coffee, but this time it didn't taste bitter. It tasted like earth, like strength, like a return. They had woken up the merchant, and the merchant was about to collect every outstanding bill, with interest. The next morning did not bring the regret Elena expected, but a storm of missed calls and voicemails full of poison. My phone, however, stayed quiet except for a punctual notification at 7 in the morning. It was Ines from the market, the fastest gossip network, faster than any social app. Her message was short, recorded over the noise of steel shutters rolling up. Rosa, tell your almost in-laws not to bother coming today. Nobody's going to sell them a single tomato. Around here, loyalty is weighed on a scale, and she came up short. I smiled while pouring my coffee. The justice of the courts is slow, and sometimes blind, but the justice of the marketplace is fast, brutal, and has the memory of an elephant. Elena walked out of her room with swollen eyes, dragging her feet, looking like a ghost in her own home. Mom, Manuel's lawyer called. He says if we don't come to his office at 10 to reach a settlement, they're going to sue me for emotional damages. Says I'm an accomplice by omission. She dropped her phone on the table like it was a grenade with no pin. Let them bark, sweetheart. A barking dog rarely bites, especially one with no teeth left. I picked up my old black leather purse, the one I've had for 15 years, heavy as if it carried bricks though it only held my documents. Get dressed. We're not going to see any second-rate lawyer just yet. First we have an appointment at the bank. The taxi ride was silent. Elena stared out the window, wringing her hands. I went over the numbers in my head. Manuel was lazy, yes, but lazy men get creative when it comes to avoiding work. The theft of the $41,000 was only the tip of the iceberg. I felt it in my bones, the same bones that predict rain and disaster. We walked into the bank branch, the air conditioning hitting us in the face. The security guard, an older man with a gray mustache, nodded at me. Good morning, Dona Rosa. Here to see the manager. That's right, and I'm in a hurry. I didn't wait in line. I walked straight to the manager's assistant's desk. She tried to tell me I needed an appointment, but seeing the look on my face, the one I used to give suppliers who tried to sell me rotten fruit, she picked up the phone immediately. 5 minutes later we were sitting in the manager's glass office. Mr. Castillo, a man I'd known since he was a teller and I deposited the week's earnings in paper bags, looked at us with concern. Dona Rosa, I heard about the unauthorized withdrawal. The system didn't flag it as fraud because it was made with the correct login, but that's not why we're here, Castillo, I interrupted, placing my hands on the desk. That's already with the prosecutor's office. We came to review my daughter's credit history. I want to know everything. Cards, personal loans, payroll credits, everything with Elena's signature on it. Elena shrank in her chair. Mom, I haven't applied for anything. I just signed some papers Manuel asked me to. Said it was for a life insurance policy for me. I closed my eyes for a second, asking heaven for patience. There it was. The next bomb. Well, I said, opening my eyes and taking a sip of tea, feeling the warmth revive me. Then get ready, because tomorrow we're going to the bank. Castillo typed on his computer. The silence stretched, tense as a rubber band about to snap. I watched his eyebrows furrow, first with doubt, then with alarm. Elena, he said, turning the screen toward us. You authorized a personal loan 6 months ago. No, she whispered. And a platinum credit card with an $80,000 limit. No, I don't even work right now. Well, they're here, and both are maxed out. The personal loan was for $150,000. The money was transferred to an account under the name, he adjusted his glasses, Manuel Reyes, under the concept of spousal loan. I felt a punch in the stomach, but I didn't let it show. Elena let out a strangled sob, hands over her mouth. $230,000, she murmured. Mom, he put me in debt for $230,000, plus late fees, Castillo added gravely. Elena, you're on the credit bureau's blacklist. If this continues, they're going to seize your assets. I looked at my daughter and watched something break inside her. It wasn't sadness. It was the idealized image of her husband shattering, revealing the parasite underneath. Manuel hadn't just robbed his mother-in-law. He had mortgaged his own wife's future to fund his vices and his fantasies of grandeur. Print everything, Castillo, I ordered, my voice turning to cold metal. Every statement, every contract with those forged or fraudulently obtained signatures. I want the dates, the times, and the transfers. Dona Rosa, this is aggravated fraud. Elena would have to sue her own husband to disown the debt. I stood up, gripping my purse. That is exactly what we're going to do. Thank you, Castillo. We walked out of the bank with a thick folder under my arm. The midday sun was brutal, but Elena wasn't crying anymore. She walked beside me, eyes fixed on the pavement, a new rigidity in her shoulders. Pity had turned into horror, and horror, if cooked properly, turns into rage. Now, I said, checking my watch. Let's go see that lawyer. His office smelled of damp and cheap cologne trying to mask cigarette smoke. A bald man in a shiny suit too big for him sat behind a desk covered in disorganized papers. Beside him sat Consuelo, Manuel's mother, eyes red, wearing an expression of premature triumph when she saw us walk in. Well, well, said the lawyer without standing. I thought you wouldn't come. Please, sit. Dona Consuelo is very upset about her son's unjust arrest. We'll stand, I said, staying near the door. Elena stood beside me, clutching the bank folder against her chest like a shield. Look, Rosa, the lawyer began, lacing his fingers together. Let's be practical. Your son-in-law made a mistake. Yes, he took money without asking, but keeping him in jail doesn't give you your money back. If you drop the charges today, Manuel agrees to pay, say, $200 a month until the debt is settled. And of course, Elena needs to sign a letter stating she gave him permission to clear his record. Consuelo nodded eagerly. It's only fair, Rosa. He's your family. Don't be so vengeful. My son is suffering in there with real criminals. I let them talk. I let them finish their rehearsed speech. When they were done, I stepped forward and dropped the bank folder onto the lawyer's desk. The dull thud made Consuelo jump in her chair. What is this? The lawyer asked, eyeing the papers with suspicion. That, counselor, is the reason your client isn't getting out of jail for a very, very long time. I leaned forward, resting my worn hands on the cheap wood. In there is proof of bank fraud, document forgery, and identity theft against my daughter, Elena. The total comes to nearly $300,000, on top of the $41,000 he stole from me. The lawyer opened the folder. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. His smug smile disappeared. What does it say? Consuelo asked, leaning in without understanding the numbers. It says your son, Elena spoke for the first time, in a voice I didn't recognize, hard and raw, took out loans in my name while I was asleep. It says he forged my signature. It says the money he claimed to earn from his imaginary businesses was actually money he was stealing from me. Lies, Consuelo shouted. Javier would never do that. He adores you. He adores himself, Consuelo, I answered sharply. And now let's talk about reality. Counselor, you know that with these federal fraud charges, there's no bail that will hold. Manuel stays inside for the entire trial. And I'll tell you something else. My lawyer has already requested a freeze on any account connected to Manuel Reyes. The lawyer paled at the mention of my attorney's name, a man known across every courthouse in the city as a shark of the courtroom. We can negotiate. If these charges go through, he's finished. We could sell the new car, recover something. The car is already impounded, I said with a cold smile. And we're not here to negotiate. We're here to inform you. Elena is filing for divorce tomorrow. And you, Consuelo, I turned to her. I heard you had some trouble at the market today. Shame. Seems people already know what kind of son you raised. And I'll tell you one more thing, since you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with. That little restaurant you run, the one you pay rent on? The landlord passed away 2 months ago. His children are selling the property. And guess who made an offer this morning for that commercial space, using some money from an old piece of land I'd almost forgotten about. It was half a bluff. The landlord had died, and I did have money saved from a piece of land, but I hadn't bought anything yet. Still, fear is far more effective than truth. Consuelo's eyes filled with absolute terror. Her livelihood, her little kingdom, was suddenly at risk. No, you wouldn't, she stammered. I'm capable of that, and more, when someone comes after my child, I said, gesturing to Elena. So I suggest you find yourself another market, and another lawyer, because this man can't save your son from what's coming. I picked up my purse and nodded to Elena. Let's go, sweetheart. It smells like garbage in here. We walked out, leaving behind a tomb-like silence, broken only by the sound of Consuelo beginning to cry. A cry of defeat, not manipulation. Out on the street, the air felt lighter. Elena took a deep breath, as if she'd been holding it for 3 years. Mom, she said as we waited for the bus, did you really buy Consuelo's restaurant space? I winked at her. I don't need another space, sweetheart. I already worked hard enough. But she doesn't need to know that. Fear will keep her away, and that's what matters. We walked home in the late afternoon light. Consuelo's car was gone. Nobody was waiting for us. The house sat quiet, protected by the new locks and by our new attitude. Elena went straight to the kitchen, but not to cry. She grabbed a large trash bag and started emptying out every piece of junk Manuel used to love. Cheap chips, sugary snacks, hot sauces that used to stain our tablecloth. I'm going to clean everything, Mom. I want this house to smell like us again. I sat in my chair and pulled out my old accounting notebook, but this time I didn't write down losses. On the first clean page, I wrote, beginning of operations, recovery of dignity. 6 months passed. Manuel received a 5-year sentence for fraud and abuse of trust, no bail, given his flight risk and prior record uncovered in another state for an old pyramid scheme charge. Elena's debt was fought in court, and her lawyer proved most of the signatures were forged, cutting the amount owed dramatically. What remained, we paid down together, month by month, working side by side. We reopened my old market stall. At first people whispered, said I was crazy to go back to work at 67, that I should be resting. But rest is for the dead, or for the rich, and I am neither. Besides, work heals. The smell of damp earth, cilantro, and ripe guava cleaned my soul of the bitterness Manuel had left soaked into the walls of my house. Elena stood beside me every morning at 4 a.m., no longer in silk pajamas to look pretty for a husband who didn't deserve her, but in thick denim overalls and work boots, her hair pulled back in a tight braid, identical to the one I wore at her age. She haggled with suppliers who had 30 years in the business and didn't back down an inch. That was my real profit. Watching my daughter become a real woman, someone who no longer shrank in her chair, someone who could stand her ground. One morning, Consuelo came shuffling through the market, older, not wise old like me, but worn old. She stopped in front of my stall, hesitating. I kept weighing tomatoes for a customer without acknowledging her, but I knew she could hear me. "Good morning, Rosa," she murmured, twisting her purse strap. "I came to see if you'd extend me some credit for onions and potatoes. My supplier wouldn't give me any today, says I owe from last week." I looked up and met her eyes. I felt no pity, but no hatred either. Just the cold indifference you feel for a fly that no longer buzzes. We don't extend credit here, Consuelo. Ines told you, the butcher told you. Your credit in this market ended the day your son decided to rob me, and you decided to applaud him. Please, Rosa. The restaurant is empty. Nobody comes anymore. They say we cook with stolen money. Her voice cracked. Manuel calls me every day from prison, asking for money for protection. Says they beat him if he doesn't pay. I already sold the television. Sold my jewelry. I have nothing left. Elena walked up at that moment, carrying a crate of papayas on her shoulder with a strength that filled me with pride. She set the crate down with a heavy thud and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Seeing her almost mother-in-law, since the divorce was nearly finalized, she straightened her back. Elena, sweetheart, Consuelo began, searching for the weak link, but the link had forged itself into steel. I'm not your daughter, Consuelo, Elena said, calm but firm. And if Manuel is having trouble in there, it's because he brought it on himself. We have an enormous debt to pay because of his fraud. Every dollar that comes into this register is for cleaning my name at the bank, not for feeding someone else's vices. She glanced at the onions. The kilo is $1.50. Cash only. If not, please don't block the customers. Consuelo looked at us, searching for any trace of the old submission, but found only dignity. She lowered her head, pulled out a crumpled bill, bought her onions, and walked away dragging her feet, defeated not by us, but by the consequences of the way she had raised her son. That evening, one of our regular customers, a young woman named Rocio who always comes carrying her baby, watched her go and turned to me with wide eyes. Dona Rosa, you're so strong. I couldn't do that. My husband sometimes takes money from my paycheck, and I don't say anything, just to avoid a fight. I stopped arranging peppers and wiped my hands on my apron. I took her hand gently. Listen to me, my dear. Money comes and goes, but respect, once lost, never comes back. If he takes $5 from you today and you stay quiet, tomorrow he takes your soul. It's not about being strong. It's about having memory. We women sometimes think enduring is loving, but enduring only teaches them they can keep hitting. Rocio nodded, eyes filled with tears, hugging her baby tighter. The debt is nearly paid off now. The market has become not just my business, but my school and my pulpit. Women from the neighborhood come to buy fruit and stay for the advice. They see Elena, who used to walk with her head down, now directing the porters with sharp whistles and clear orders. They see that it's possible to climb out of the hole. Last week, a letter arrived from the courthouse confirming Manuel's sentence stands. No appeal granted. Elena read it at the kitchen table, the same table where this entire nightmare began. There's a vase of sunflowers there now, ones she brought from the stall. You know what I feel, Mom? She asked, setting down the letter. Not sadness. Relief. Like I finally took off shoes that had been pinching my feet for years. She smiled at me, a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you for waking me up. If you hadn't called the police that morning, I think I'd still be sitting in that kitchen, watching our lives get spent. You woke yourself up, sweetheart, I said. I just rang the bell. We closed the stall that evening. Pulling down the metal shutter has a different sound at the end of the day. A dull, final thud, the sound of a mission complete. Walking to the bus stop, we passed a used car lot. There, in the front row with a sign that read Court Auction, was that car. The famous silver-gray sedan Manuel had sold his freedom and his family's peace for. It no longer gleamed. It sat there covered in road dust, one tire flat. Elena stopped to look at it. Look at that. All that tragedy for a piece of metal. That's how fools' illusions are, sweetheart. They shine bright for one day and turn to junk the next. We're not like that. We're like clay pots. The more fire they put us through, the harder we get. We got home. The scent of lavender greeted me at the door. No more cigarette smoke, no more plastic trophies, no more bad energy. On the kitchen table, where this whole nightmare began, there now sat a vase of sunflowers Elena had brought from the stall. I sat in my chair, the one with the embroidered cushion. My knees ached. Yes. My hands were rough, dirt under my nails. I was tired down to my bones, but it was a sweet exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone building, not someone enduring. I pulled out my new savings notebook. The old one, the one Manuel emptied, I kept as a reminder, so I never forget what blind trust costs. In this new notebook, the numbers are still modest, just a few $1,000s we've managed to save after paying down debts and expenses. But every cent written there is ours. Nobody gave it to us, and by God, nobody is ever going to take it from us again. Elena sat across from me with 2 cups of cinnamon tea. Mom, I was thinking. The stall next to ours, the one that used to be old Rivas's. I heard his children still haven't sold it. I looked at her with curiosity. Consuelo's still running her place there, but she's not paying rent, and they're evicting her next month. I was thinking, once we finish paying off the debt, maybe we could rent it ourselves. And what would we do with 2 stalls, girl? Expand. You always wanted to sell seeds and spices, not just fruit. And I've had some ideas about selling juices and prepared salads for office workers. I stayed quiet, looking at her. I saw the shine of ambition in her eyes. Not Manuel's vulgar ambition, the kind that wants easy money without sweat. This was a merchant's ambition, the kind that sees an opportunity and calculates the work needed to seize it. It was the same look my late husband used to have, and the same one I've carried my whole life. I smiled, sipping my tea. Juices and salads. Sounds good. But you're going to have to get up at 3 in the morning to chop fruit. Whatever time it takes, boss, she answered, winking at me. Boss. It didn't bother me anymore to be called that. Before, it felt like a heavy title, a burden. Now I understood it was a medal. I had defended my castle, saved my daughter, even though she had to learn to wield the sword herself, and I had defeated the dragon, who turned out to be nothing more than a lizard with delusions of grandeur. Manuel thought that by stealing my savings, he had ruined me. Poor fool. He didn't understand that my true wealth was never in the bank. My wealth was in my ability to rise after I was knocked down, in the network of friends who held me up, and in the fighting blood running through my veins. And now, finally, it runs free through my daughters too. I finished my tea, feeling the warmth travel down my throat. Tomorrow would be another day of struggle. There would be prices to haggle, crates to carry, cold mornings to endure. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Because as long as I have the strength to stand and the voice to defend what's mine, nobody will ever touch a hair on this family again. I stood to go to bed. I ran my hand along the back of Elena's chair. Get some rest, partner. Tomorrow we go look at that stall next door. If we're going to dream, let's dream big. She smiled. I turned off the kitchen light, but the house didn't go dark. Moonlight poured through the window, lighting up the place where fear used to live, and where now, there was only a future. Old age didn't take anything from me. If anything, it gave me the clarity to see who belongs at my table, and who doesn't. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, the account was finally settled.